Billionaire Ethan Cole was hurrying to a meeting when a fast-moving bicycle hit his hand. His Tesla key slipped out and rolled deep under a parked truck. He got down on his knees and tried to reach for it. His arm shook and his expensive suit got covered in grease and dirt, but the key was still too far away. Suddenly, a homeless man walked up and gently asked if he could help. He got on his knees, crawled halfway under the truck, and brought the key back to Ethan. When Ethan tried to give him money, the man just smiled and shook his head. It seemed like a small moment, but that simple act would lead Ethan to a secret his mother had been searching for 25 years. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The key hit the pavement with a sharp clink, bounced once against the tire, and disappeared beneath the UPS truck. Ethan Cole froze mid-step, his hand still extended where the key had been seconds ago. A bicycle courier had just blown past him, close enough that the wind displaced his perfectly styled hair. The rider didn't look back, didn't slow down, just kept pedaling through the morning traffic like nothing had happened. It was 9:30 a.m. on a Monday in downtown Manhattan. The morning sun cast long shadows between the glass towers, and the street was alive with the usual symphony of car horns and hurried footsteps. Ethan had just emerged from his company's building, a gleaming 40-story structure where his name occupied the top floor. At 40 years old, he'd built an empire in commercial real estate. The Tesla parked at the curb was just one small symbol of that success. But right now, none of that mattered. His car key was under a truck. Ethan glanced around, assessing his options. The truck driver had his seat reclined, a baseball cap pulled over his face, clearly on break. The building's security guard stood near the entrance, laughing loudly into his phone, completely absorbed in his conversation. A woman in a business suit walked past without even glancing his way, her heels clicking rapidly against the concrete. He crouched down, peering under the truck. The key lay there in the shadows, just visible in the dim light beneath the chassis. It looked impossibly far. Ethan reached under, his arm stretching as far as it would go. The asphalt was rough and cold against his palm. He could feel the grit collecting on the sleeve of his $1,500 suit. His fingers stretched, grasping at air. The key sat just beyond reach, mocking him. He pushed further, his shoulder pressing against the truck's undercarriage, feeling the sharp edge of metal dig into his arm. Nothing, still inches away. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling back. A streak of black grease now decorated his cuff, and his palm was scraped raw. This wasn't how Ethan Cole's mornings went. His life was scheduled, controlled, predictable. He had a meeting with Japanese investors in 30 minutes. The most important meeting of the quarter, millions of dollars hung in the balance. And he was stuck here, unable to retrieve his own damn car key. He looked around again, more desperately this time. The security guard was still on his phone, now turning away to walk back toward the building entrance. The truck driver hadn't moved. A businessman walked past, saw Ethan crouched by the truck, and quickly averted his eyes as if witnessing something embarrassing. "Excuse me," Ethan called out to him. "Could you help me for just a—" The man waved him off without stopping. "Sorry, late for a meeting." Frustration bubbled up in Ethan's chest. He pulled out his phone, considering calling his assistant Emily. But what would she do? She couldn't exactly teleport here and retrieve it for him. He could call a tow truck, but that would take at least an hour, maybe more. The meeting started at 10. He was running out of time. Ethan got down on his hands and knees, ignoring the dirt on the sidewalk, ignoring how ridiculous he must look in his tailored suit. He pressed his cheek against the cold concrete, trying to get a better angle, reaching under again with both hands this time. His fingers brushed the key. So close. Just another inch. He stretched further, his ribs pressing painfully against the truck's undercarriage, his face scraping against the rough pavement. His fingertips touched the metal of the key, but he couldn't get purchase on it. It just slid further away. "Come on," he hissed through gritted teeth, his arm aching from the awkward angle. A couple walked past, the woman glancing down at him with a mixture of pity and amusement. Neither offered to help. Ethan pulled back, sitting on his heels, breathing hard. His suit was filthy now. Grease on the sleeve, dirt on the knees, a tear forming in the fabric at his shoulder. His hands were black with grime. His hair, previously perfect, now hung in his eyes. He felt utterly, completely powerless. Here he was, a man who commanded boardrooms, who made decisions affecting hundreds of employees, who had more money than most people would see in a lifetime, and he couldn't retrieve a simple key from under a truck. He looked at his watch. 9:44 a.m. 16 minutes until the meeting. Even if he got the key right now, he'd barely make it. And he was nowhere close to getting it. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his entire adult life building walls of success, insulating himself from the helplessness he'd felt as a child. And here it was again, that same crushing sense of being trapped, unable to fix a simple problem. "Need some help there, sir?" A voice, quiet, almost apologetic, broke through his spiral of frustration. Ethan looked up sharply. An older man stood a few feet away, watching him with concerned eyes. Maybe 60, maybe older. It was hard to tell beneath the weathered features and the grime. He wore a coat that had seen better years, probably better decades. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows, and the color had faded to an indeterminate gray-brown. His face was lined with the kind of wrinkles that came from sleeping rough and worrying often, but his eyes were surprisingly gentle. Ethan recognized him vaguely. He'd seen him just minutes ago, getting yelled at by a middle-aged woman who'd been waving him away from her storefront. "Don't stand here ruining the view," she'd snapped. "You're bad for business." Now this same man, this homeless man, was offering to help him. Ethan started, then stopped. Pride warred with desperation. He didn't want to accept help from a homeless person. What would people think? But then again, what choice did he have? "My key. It's under there. I can't reach it." The man nodded slowly, as if this were a perfectly normal situation. "Let me try, sir. Sometimes a different angle helps." Without waiting for permission, the man approached and knelt down on the sidewalk. His knees touched the concrete with practiced ease, a motion he'd clearly performed countless times. He didn't hesitate, didn't worry about his clothes getting dirty. He lowered himself further, his body surprisingly flexible despite his age, and slid partway under the truck, with a fluidity that came from years of making himself small, fitting into tight spaces. Ethan watched, frozen between embarrassment and desperate hope. The man's arm disappeared under the truck, reaching further than Ethan had been able to manage. His body was thinner, his frame more compact. He could get lower, reach deeper. "I see it," the man murmured, his voice slightly muffled. "Just a bit more." There was a moment of silence, the sound of fabric scraping against metal. And then, "Got it." The man's hand emerged, fingers curled around the key. Bits of dirt and a smear of old engine oil clung to the metal, and the man's hand was even dirtier. But there it was, the key. Retrieved. The man carefully pulled himself out from under the truck, stood with a slight grunt, his joints clearly protesting, and wiped the key against his coat. The coat was hardly cleaner than the key, but the gesture was careful, almost reverent, as if he were polishing something precious. "Here you go, sir," he said, extending the key toward Ethan. His voice was calm, respectful. There was no judgment in his eyes, no resentment at having to help someone obviously wealthier than him. Just a simple, uncomplicated kindness. Ethan took the key, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. Relief flooded through him, sharp and almost overwhelming. He'd been stuck, helpless, and this stranger had fixed it in seconds. Thank you," he finally managed, his voice rougher than he intended. I couldn't get it. Thank you." The man smiled, a small genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. "No trouble at all, sir. Glad I could help." Ethan reached quickly for his wallet, pulling out several $20 bills. He had about $200 in cash. "Please, let me give you something. You just saved me from missing the most important meeting of my life." The man looked at the money for a brief moment. Ethan saw something flicker in his eyes. Not greed, but a kind of quiet acknowledgement of need. The man's coat was thin. His shoes had holes. $200 probably meant food for weeks. But then the man shook his head gently. "No need, sir. I just helped because I saw you needed help." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. "But you should take it. You helped me." "And that's enough," the man said simply. His voice was kind but firm. "I didn't help you for money. I helped because you were stuck and I could unstick you. That's all." Ethan stood there, hand still outstretched, bills fluttering slightly in the morning breeze. In his 40 years of life, he'd learned that everything had a price. Assistants needed salaries. Business partners needed contracts. Friends needed networking opportunities. Even charity galas came with expectations of social return. But this man, this stranger who clearly had nothing, who probably needed this money more than anyone Ethan had met in years, wanted nothing in return. Not because he didn't need it, But because his help hadn't been transactional, the realization made Ethan feel small in a way that had nothing to do with his position on the ground moments ago. Are you certain?" Ethan asked, his voice quieter now. "I'm certain, sir." The man's smile remained gentle. "You have a good day now. Hope your meeting goes well." He turned and walked away, his gait slow and slightly uneven, shoulders curved inward against the world. Ethan watched him go, the key still in one hand, the money in the other, feeling something stir in his chest, something he couldn't quite name. It was a feeling from long ago, from a time before the success and the money, from childhood days he'd tried very hard to forget, days when he and his mother had very little, days when kindness from strangers had meant survival. The memory flickered and faded, but the feeling remained. Ethan looked down at his watch. 9:42 a.m. The meeting was in 18 minutes. He should get in the car, drive to the office, focus on the deal. The Japanese investors had flown in specifically for this. Millions of dollars hung in the balance. But instead, Ethan found himself still standing there, watching the man's retreating figure disappear around the corner. The sound came from down the street, a man's voice, loud and aggressive. "No money? Then don't beg. Get out of here." Ethan's head snapped toward the noise. The homeless man had stopped at a newsstand, and a heavy-set man in a cheap suit was towering over him, a Starbucks cup in one hand, his face red with irritation. Samuel's voice was quiet in response, barely audible from where Ethan stood. "Sir, I just wanted to ask if you could spare a few dollars for food. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning." "Not my problem. You want to eat? Get a job." The man laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Lazy people like you are what's wrong with this city." The newsstand vendor looked away, pretending to organize his papers. Several pedestrians walked faster, eyes averted. No one wanted to get involved. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. He started walking toward them before he'd made a conscious decision to move. His expensive shoes clicked against the pavement with each step. By the time he reached the newsstand, the heavy-set man was still ranting. "Excuse me," Ethan said, his voice carrying the quiet authority he used in boardrooms. The man turned, and his expression shifted the moment he took in Ethan's appearance. The tailored suit, the confident bearing, the subtle markers of wealth and power. His aggression melted into something more cautious. "This guy's bothering me," the man said, though his tone had lost its edge. Ethan ignored him, turning instead to Samuel. "How much do you need?" Samuel looked startled. Sir, just $5 or $6 would be enough. Enough for bread and maybe—" Ethan pulled out his wallet and removed all the cash inside, about $200. He held it out. "Take it. Buy what you need." Samuel stared at the money as if it might disappear if he blinked. His hands trembled as he reached for it. "Sir, this is too much. I can't possibly—" "Take it," Ethan repeated, his voice gentler but firm. Slowly, carefully, Samuel accepted the bills. His fingers, rough and marked with old scars, folded the money with reverent care. "Thank you, sir. Thank you." Ethan nodded and turned away. The heavy-set man had already disappeared into the crowd. The newsstand vendor was suddenly very interested in selling a paper to someone else. Ethan walked back to his car, his hand on the door handle, when something made him glance back. Samuel stood there, looking at the money in his hands with an expression of disbelief. Then, instead of heading toward the nearest store, he did something unexpected. He walked toward an elderly woman sitting on a bus stop bench. Ethan's hand remained on the door handle, but he didn't open it. He watched. The woman, she must have been in her 70s, sat hunched over, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wore a thin cardigan despite the cool morning air, and her face was creased with worry. Samuel approached her with the same gentle manner he'd shown Ethan. "Ma'am, you look troubled. Is something wrong?" The woman looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. I forgot my wallet at home. I have a doctor's appointment at 10 o'clock. I've been waiting for this appointment for 2 weeks, but without money, they won't let me in." Her voice cracked. Ethan watched as Samuel carefully unfolded the stack of bills, the money Ethan had just given him, and split it in half. $100 went into the woman's trembling hands. "Take this, ma'am. Your health is more important than anything." The woman, Mildred Hayes, though Ethan didn't know her name, clutched Samuel's hand. "You! Who are you? Why would you—" "It's okay, ma'am. Please go to your appointment. Don't worry about the money." Mrs. Hayes's hands shook as she gripped the bills, tears streaming down her weathered face. God bless you. God bless you, son. Ethan stood beside his car, one hand still on the door, the other holding his phone. He looked at his watch. 9:51. 9 minutes until the meeting. 9 minutes to drive 6 blocks in New York traffic. He thought about the Japanese investors, about the deal that could expand his company into the Asian market, about the months of negotiation that had led to this morning. Then he thought about the man who'd just given away half of everything he had. Ethan pulled out his phone and called his assistant. Emily. Good morning, Mr. Cole. I'm in the conference room setting up for the... Cancel the 10 o'clock meeting. There was a pause. I'm sorry, what? Cancel it. Reschedule for this afternoon. But sir, they flew in from Tokyo specifically for this morning. Mr. Tanaka was very clear about his schedule. I know, Emily. Tell them something urgent came up. Apologize profusely. Offer them lunch at Per Se, my treat. Reschedule for 3 p.m. Sir, is everything all right? Everything's fine, just do it, please. Yes, sir. Ethan ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. For a moment, he just stood there, keys in hand, staring at the Tesla that represented a tiny fraction of his wealth. Then he locked the car and started walking. Samuel had moved away from Mrs. Hayes, who was now hurrying toward the bus that had just pulled up, clutching her money like a lifeline. Samuel walked slowly, his shoulders still carrying that habitual curve, his gait unhurried. He held the remaining $100 carefully, as if it were made of glass. Ethan followed, keeping about 20 yards back. He'd never done anything like this in his life. A CEO of a billion-dollar company, shadowing a homeless man through the streets of New York. But he couldn't stop. Something about Samuel Reed, though Ethan still didn't know his name, had caught hold of him, like a hook embedded deep. He needed to understand, needed to know what kind of man helped a stranger who'd just yelled at him. What kind of man gave away half of everything he had without hesitation? Samuel turned a corner, and Ethan followed, staying far enough back to avoid detection, close enough to keep him in sight. They passed a coffee shop, a dry cleaner, a small park where an old man was feeding pigeons. Finally, Samuel stopped in front of a 7-Eleven convenience store. He stood outside for a moment, looking through the glass door, his hand in his pocket where he'd put the money. Then, with what seemed like resolution, he went inside. Ethan positioned himself near the window, pretending to look at his phone while watching through the glass. Inside, Samuel stood before the bread aisle, his hand hovering over the cheapest loaf on the shelf, white bread marked down because it was a day from expiration. He picked it up gently, as if even this small luxury required careful consideration. Then Samuel's attention shifted to the checkout counter, where a young woman stood with a small child in her arms. And Ethan leaned closer to the window because something was happening. The child was crying, soft, whimpering sounds that every parent recognizes as the precursor to a full meltdown. Shh, baby, shh, the young mother, Anna Rivers, whispered, bouncing the 4-year-old gently. Mommy's getting medicine. You'll feel better soon. On the counter sat a box of children's Tylenol, price tag reading $12.99. Anna's wallet lay open beside it, revealing a few crumpled ones and some change. She was counting it for the 3rd time, her lips moving silently, as if hoping the math would somehow change. The cashier, a young Vietnamese woman with kind eyes, waited patiently. I'm so sorry, Anna said finally, her voice thin with desperation. I thought I had enough. I'm short $5. I swear I counted before I left home. Behind her in line, a middle-aged man in business casual glanced ostentatiously at his watch and sighed. He had that look of someone perpetually 5 minutes late for something important. Look, can you hurry this up? He said. Some of us have jobs to get to. Anna turned to him, her face flushing. I'm sorry, She swallowed hard. Sir, could you possibly lend me $5? I'll pay you back, I promise. I can give you my number, my address. My daughter has a fever, and I need this medicine. The man's face hardened. I don't know you. How do I know you'll actually pay me back? If you can't afford it, don't buy it. Simple as that. He looked at the cashier. Can she just move aside so I can pay? Anna's eyes filled with tears. The little girl in her arms cried louder, her face flushed with fever. Mommy, it hurts. I know, baby, I know. Anna's voice broke. She looked down at the medicine, then at her daughter, then back at the medicine. Her hand trembled as she reached to put the box back. Excuse me. The voice was quiet but clear. Everyone turned. Samuel stood a few feet behind them, his weathered coat and worn shoes marking him as clearly as a neon sign. In the fluorescent lights of the store, the dirt on his clothes was more visible, the lines on his face deeper. He stepped forward slowly, as if approaching a skittish animal. From his pocket, he drew out the folded $100 bill, the last of what Ethan had given him, all he had left in the world. "Please," he said to the cashier, "ring up her medicine too. I'll pay for both." Anna stared at him, her mouth falling open. She looked at the man, at his ragged appearance, at the money in his trembling hand, and then back at his face. "You, but you." She couldn't form the words. "Your daughter needs medicine," Samuel said simply. "That's what matters." The cashier smiled, her eyes suddenly bright with moisture. Her fingers flew over the register. "The medicine is $12.99, and your bread is $3.50. Total is $16.49. Samuel handed over the $100 bill. The register drawer opened with a cheerful ding, and the cashier counted out his change. 83 out of 51. Anna clutched the box of Tylenol to her chest like it was made of gold. Tears streamed openly down her face now. Thank you so much. I don't know how to... I'll pay you back. Tell me your name, where I can find you." Samuel shook his head gently. "No need, ma'am. Just take care of your little girl." "But I have to repay you somehow." "You don't owe me anything, really." He collected his change and his bread, the plastic bag crinkling in his hand. The businessman behind them had gone quiet, his face red. He paid for his bottle of water without making eye contact with anyone and left quickly. Anna stood there, holding her daughter and the medicine, crying silently. The cashier reached over and squeezed her hand. "Some people are angels," the cashier said softly. Outside, Ethan had witnessed the entire exchange through the window. He stood with his back against the brick wall of the building next door, his hand pressed against his chest where his heart was beating harder than it should. $200. To him, it was what he spent on a single business lunch without thinking. To Samuel, it had been everything. A week's worth of meals, maybe more. Maybe the difference between eating and starving. And he'd given it away. Not once, but twice. First to Mrs. Hayes, now to Anna and her sick child. Ethan felt something burning in his throat, behind his eyes. When was the last time he'd felt this? This sense of, what was it? Shame? Admiration? A painful combination of both? He'd made his fortune by being smart, by being calculating, by understanding that every transaction had two sides and you needed to come out ahead. That was how business worked. That was how the world worked, except Samuel Reed lived in a different world, one where Ethan's rules apparently didn't apply. The door chimed as Samuel emerged from the store. He held his small plastic bag, one loaf of day-old bread and $83.51 in change, and stood for a moment in the morning sun, his eyes closed, taking a deep breath. Then he started walking again, and Ethan, without hesitation, followed. They walked for several blocks. Samuel moved slowly, conserving energy, the way homeless people learn to move when every calorie mattered. He passed a Starbucks without glancing at it, past a McDonald's where the smell of breakfast sandwiches hung heavy in the air. Ethan's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten yet this morning, had planned to grab something after the meeting, but Samuel had been without food since yesterday, maybe longer, and still he walked past the restaurants without breaking stride. They entered a quieter part of the city, where the buildings grew older and the streets narrower. The morning crowd thinned. Fewer suits, more worn jackets. Fewer briefcases, more plastic bags and shopping carts. Samuel turned into an alley. Ethan hesitated at the entrance. The alley ran behind an abandoned warehouse, dark even in daytime, smelling of old garbage and something more pungent he didn't want to identify. Cardboard boxes lined one wall, some flattened, some formed into crude shelters. He heard voices, low murmurs, a cough, someone singing tunelessly to themselves. Ethan stepped into the alley, his eyes adjusting to the dimness. Samuel had walked about halfway down and was settling into a spot beneath a crooked overhang where someone had rigged a tarp against the rain. An old blanket lay folded there, and Samuel sat down on it with visible relief, his back against the wall. This was home. Ethan felt his chest constrict. This narrow strip of filthy concrete was where a good man spent his nights. Samuel carefully removed the bread from its plastic bag, handling it like fine china. He opened the package slowly, the plastic crinkling loud in the quiet alley, and broke off a piece. Before he could bring it to his mouth, A voice croaked from nearby. "Nothing today either." An older man, older than Samuel, though it was hard to tell by how much, shuffled into view. Walter Grant was thin in a way that spoke of long-term malnutrition, his clothes hanging off a frame that seemed barely capable of supporting it. White hair stuck out in wild tufts around his head, and his face had the hollowed look of someone who'd forgotten what full felt like. He collapsed onto a piece of cardboard a few feet from Samuel, breathing heavily from even that small exertion. "Couldn't get anything?" Samuel asked quietly. Walter shook his head. "Everyone just walked past, like I'm invisible." He laughed, a bitter sound. "Maybe I am." Samuel looked at the bread in his hands. He looked at Walter. He looked at the 83R51 in his pocket, enough to buy more food, enough for several meals if he was careful. Then he looked at Walter again, really looked, and saw the tremor in the old man's hands, the way his lips had a slight blue tinge. Samuel stood up and walked over to Walter. He held out the bread. "Here, eat." Walter's eyes widened. No, Samuel, you haven't eaten either. I can't." "Walter, please, take it. I already owe you too much. You gave me your blanket when I was sick. You shared your food last week. I can't keep taking from you." Walter's voice cracked with a mixture of shame and gratitude. Samuel sat down beside his friend, still holding out the bread. "Walt, how long have we known each other?" 3 years? "About that. In 3 years, have I ever asked you to pay me back for anything?" Walter's eyes grew damp. "No, but—" "Then stop worrying about debt." Samuel's voice was gentle but firm. "We're in this together, you and me. Today I have something. I share with you. Tomorrow you have something. You share with me. That's how we survive. That's how we stay human." He pressed the bread into Walter's hands. "Besides," Samuel added with a small smile, "I still have some money. I can buy more. But you look hungrier than me, old friend." Walter held the bread, tears rolling down his weathered cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered. "God, Samuel, thank you." From the mouth of the alley, Ethan watched. His hands were clenched at his sides, his jaw tight. Samuel had given away the last of his food. Again. He'd kept nothing for himself. Again. It was irrational. It was impractical. It went against every principle of self-preservation, and it was the most beautiful thing Ethan had ever seen. Before he could stop himself, before he could think better of it, Ethan walked into the alley. His footsteps echoed off the walls, loud and foreign in this place. Samuel and Walter both looked up, startled. A man in a $3,000 suit didn't belong here, and they both knew it. Samuel stood slowly, recognition dawning in his eyes. You're the man from this morning." "I am," Ethan said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, rougher than usual, strained. "I followed you." "Why?" Samuel asked. Not accusatory, just genuinely confused. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. "How did you explain something you barely understood yourself?" "I needed to know," he finally said. "This morning I gave you $200. You needed food, but you gave it all away. Twice. And just now, you gave away the last food you had." He gestured at the bread in Walter's hands. "Why? Why would you do that?" Samuel looked at him for a long moment, those gentle eyes seeming to see more than Ethan wanted to reveal. "Sir," Samuel said quietly, "would you like to sit down? This might take a while to explain." Samuel sat back down on his blanket and gestured to a relatively clean spot beside him. Ethan stared at it for a moment, at the dirty concrete, at the questionable stains, and thought about his suit. Then he thought about what he'd just witnessed and sat down anyway. The concrete was hard and cold even through the expensive fabric. Ethan could smell the alley now that he was in it. Garbage and urine and unwashed humanity. But Samuel's presence beside him carried something else. Something that cut through the unpleasantness. Dignity, maybe. Or grace. "You asked me why I give things away." Samuel began, his voice quiet and measured. "Let me tell you a story, sir. About 10 years ago, I had a life that looked a lot different than this." Walter had moved closer, eating the bread slowly, savoring each bite while listening to a story he'd probably heard before. "I had a family," Samuel continued. "A wife, a daughter. I had a job, nothing fancy, but steady. I managed a small hardware store. We had a house, a car, nothing extravagant, but we were comfortable. Happy, I thought." He paused, staring at his hands. Weathered, calloused. with dirt permanently embedded in the creases. Then the economy crashed. 2008. You remember? Ethan nodded. He'd made a fortune in those years buying up distressed properties. The thought made him feel slightly sick now. The store closed. I looked for work, but I was 50 years old, and suddenly there were 100 younger, cheaper people competing for every job. Our savings lasted 6 months. Then we lost the house. Samuel's voice remained steady, factual, as if he were recounting someone else's life. My wife, she couldn't handle it. The shame of it. She left, took our daughter, told me she'd come back when I got my life together. Did she? Ethan asked quietly. No. Last I heard, about 5 years ago, she'd remarried. Someone with a stable job, a house in the suburbs. Our daughter, she was in college. She wrote me one letter, said she'd forgiven me, but thought it was best if we didn't have contact. Too painful for everyone. He smiled, but it was the saddest smile Ethan had ever seen. She was probably right. Walter had finished his bread and was listening with his eyes closed, as if the story were a prayer. So I ended up here, Samuel said, gesturing at the alley, sleeping in doorways, under bridges, wherever I could find a spot. And at first I wanted to die. I'd lie awake at night thinking about ways to do it. Quick, painless. Just end the shame and the hunger and the cold. Ethan felt his throat tighten. But then something happened. A woman, an old flower seller, she saw me one day. I was sitting outside her shop, and instead of chasing me away, she brought me a bunch of flowers that hadn't sold. These will just wilt overnight anyway, she said. Maybe you can sell them, make a few dollars. Samuel's eyes grew distant with memory. I tried to sell them, but I was too ashamed to really push. By evening, I still had them all. I was walking past a hospital and saw a man coming out, crying. His wife had just died. I don't know why, but I gave him the flowers. Told him I was sorry for his loss. He looked at me, really looked at me like I was a person, not just a homeless man, and said, "Thank you." She loved flowers. That man, Samuel continued, came back the next day, found me in the same spot, brought me food, a warm coat, said his wife always believed in helping others, and doing this made him feel close to her again. He kept coming back for months, always with something, food, clothes, medicine when I was sick. He saved my life, that man. Ethan listened, barely breathing. And there were others. A baker who gave me day-old bread every morning. A college student who brought me blankets in winter. A nurse who treated my infections for free. None of them were rich. Most of them were barely getting by themselves. But they gave anyway. And I survived because of them. Samuel turned to look directly at Ethan, and his eyes held a depth of understanding that made Ethan feel suddenly young and naive. They taught me something, sir. They taught me that giving isn't about having plenty. It's about seeing someone who needs what you have, even if you don't have much. Because sometimes, his voice grew softer, sometimes the person who has almost nothing can give more than the person who has everything, because they understand what it means to need. But you're hungry, Ethan said, and he was surprised by how rough his voice sounded. You gave away your last food. What if no one gives you anything today? What if you don't eat? Samuel shrugged slightly. Then I don't eat today. I've gone hungry before. I'll go hungry again. But that little girl, Anna's daughter, she got her medicine. Mrs. Hayes made her doctor's appointment. Walter has food in his stomach. Those things happened because I gave what I had. And that, he paused, searching for words, that means something. That matters. You could have kept it, Ethan pressed. You could have eaten. Save the rest for tomorrow, for emergencies. I could have. Samuel agreed, but then I'd be lying to myself about what kind of man I want to be. I've lost almost everything in my life, sir. My home, my family, my dignity, my pride. But there's one thing no one can take from me, the choice to be kind, to help when I can help, to give when I can give. That's the only power I have left, and I'm not giving that up, not for anything. Ethan sat in silence. Around them, the alley continued its quiet rhythm, Walter humming tunelessly, someone coughing in the distance, the drip of water from a broken gutter. Do you know what the worst part of being homeless is? Samuel asked suddenly. It's not the hunger, it's not the cold, it's the invisibility. People look through you, they step around you like you're a piece of garbage on the sidewalk. They forget you're human. He looked down at his hands again. But when I help someone, when I give something, even if it's just a few dollars, even if it's just my last piece of bread, I stop being invisible. To them and to myself. I matter again, just for a moment. I'm not just a homeless man. I'm a person who made a difference. Ethan felt something wet on his cheek and realized with shock that he was crying. At 40 years old, a CEO who'd trained himself never to show weakness, he was sitting in a filthy alley crying. "I'm sorry," he managed. "I don't know why It's okay," Samuel said gently. "Sometimes we need to cry. Means you're still human. Still alive inside." Walter nodded sagely, as if this were profound wisdom. "Sir," Samuel said after a moment, "can I ask why you followed me? Why this matters to you?" Ethan wiped his eyes roughly. "Because I've spent 20 years building a company, making money, accumulating things. And this morning, a man with nothing taught me something about generosity that I'd completely forgotten, if I'd ever known it in the first place." He stood up, brushing off his suit uselessly. It was already filthy. "Next time I come out," Ethan said, his voice steadier now, "I'll bring more cash, so you can buy something for yourself." Samuel smiled up at him. "That's kind of you, sir, but don't do it out of pity. Do it because you believe in what I'm trying to do here. Believe that kindness matters, that we're all connected, that helping each other is what makes us human." Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. He was about to leave when a woman's voice called out from the alley entrance. "Samuel! Samuel, are you there?" A woman appeared, mid-30s, wearing the uniform of a grocery store employee, her face lit with a smile. She carried a paper bag. "Lily!" Samuel stood, genuine pleasure in his voice. Lily Carter hurried over, slightly out of breath. "I've been looking for you. The store had extra sandwiches and salads today. Past the sell date, but still perfectly good. I thought of you immediately." She handed him the bag, which was pleasantly heavy. "There's enough here for a couple of days, I think." Samuel accepted the bag with both hands, his eyes bright with moisture. "Lily, you didn't have to." "Are you kidding?" She gripped his arm affectionately. "Samuel, last month when my mom got sick and I didn't have money for her medicine, you gave me $40. That was all you had. You probably don't even remember, but I do. I'll never forget it." "I remember," Samuel said softly. "Then let me do this. It's not nearly enough to repay you, but it's something." She noticed Ethan and Walter for the first time, gave them a friendly nod, then turned back to Samuel. "I have to get back to work, but I'll check on you later this week, okay?" "Thank you, Lily. Truly." She squeezed his hand once more and left, her footsteps echoing down the alley. Samuel turned to Ethan, holding up the bag with a gentle, knowing smile. "See?" he said simply. "Everything works out. Maybe not when we want it to, maybe not how we expect, but kindness finds its way back. It always does." Ethan stood there, struck speechless by the perfect timing, the perfect proof of Samuel's philosophy. Walter chuckled quietly. "Told you, Sam. Told you it'd come back around." "You did, Walt. You were right." Ethan looked at Samuel, at this man who had nothing but gave everything, who'd lost his family but kept his faith, who slept in alleys but lived with more grace than anyone Ethan had ever met in boardrooms or country clubs. "I need to go," Ethan heard himself say, "but I'll see you again soon." "You're always welcome here, sir," Samuel said. "What's your name, if you don't mind me asking?" Ethan Cole." "Well, Mr. Cole, thank you for listening to an old man ramble. Not many people take the time. Thank you for teaching me something I should have learned a long time ago." Ethan walked out of the alley into the bright sunlight, which seemed almost harsh after the dimness. He stood blinking for a moment, disoriented, as if waking from a dream. His phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Japanese investors very understanding. Lunch at Per Se arranged, 3 p.m. Meeting confirmed. Is everything okay?" Ethan looked at the message for a long moment. Everything okay? No, nothing was okay. Everything had changed. He typed back. "Everything's fine. Thank you, Emily. See you at 3. Then he started walking toward where he'd parked his car, his mind churning with thoughts he couldn't quite organize, feelings he couldn't quite name. But one thing was clear. Samuel Reed had cracked something open inside him, something he'd sealed shut years ago. And Ethan wasn't sure if he should be grateful or terrified. Probably both. The penthouse was quiet when Ethan arrived home that evening. He'd gone to the rescheduled meeting, signed the contracts, smiled, and shaken hands with the Japanese investors. The deal was done. $30 million in new development projects. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt hollow. Now he stood in his entrance hall, looking at the marble floors and crystal chandelier, and all he could think about was Samuel's thin blanket on dirty concrete. "Ethan? Is that you?" His mother's voice came from the living room. Ethan found her there, sitting in her favorite chair near the window, a book open in her lap. Helena Cole at 64 was elegant in a way that seemed effortless. Silver hair pulled back, simple but expensive clothes, the kind of beauty that came from bone structure and good character. "Hi, Mom." Ethan crossed the room and kissed her cheek. She studied his face with the intensity only mothers possess. "You look troubled. What's wrong?" Ethan sat down heavily in the chair opposite hers. "I met someone today." "Someone?" Helena's eyebrows rose slightly. "Someone special?" "Not like that." Ethan ran his hand through his hair. "A homeless man." He told her everything. The dropped key, Samuel's help, the refusal of money, his decision to follow, the giving away of everything, the conversation in the alley, the philosophy of kindness, Lily's perfect timing. Helena listened without interrupting. Her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. But as Ethan spoke, her eyes grew brighter, shinier. "And the thing is," Ethan continued, "he has nothing, Mom. He sleeps in an alley. He goes hungry. He lost his family, his home, everything. But he's still one of the best people I've ever met. He gives away everything he has because he believes, truly believes, that kindness comes back, that it matters more than survival." When he finished, there was a long silence. Then Helena started crying. Not quiet tears, but deep, shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere profound and painful. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders trembling. "Mom!" Ethan jumped up, alarmed. He'd rarely seen his mother cry, and never like this. "What's wrong? What did I say?" She shook her head, unable to speak for a moment. Ethan knelt beside her chair, his hand on her arm, completely at a loss. Finally, Helena lowered her hands. Her face was wet, her eyes red, but there was something else in her expression, something like recognition, like memory brought painfully to life. "I know him," she whispered. "Or, I think I do." "What? How could you possibly—" 25 years ago," Helena interrupted, her voice shaking. "Before you have any real memories. I was pregnant with you. Your father—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "Your father left us. Left me. When I was 7 months pregnant, he told me he'd made a mistake, that he wasn't ready for a family. He disappeared and left me with $50,000 in debt, gambling debts I knew nothing about." Ethan felt his world tilt. "Mom, I knew Dad left, but I didn't know about the debt." "I never told you the whole story. I was too ashamed." Helena gripped his hand tightly. "I lost our apartment, lost everything. I was 7 months pregnant, and suddenly I had nothing. No family to turn to. My parents had disowned me for marrying your father in the first place. No friends with money to help. Nothing." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I slept in parks, Ethan. I ate from trash cans. I was so desperate, so scared. I thought about ending it, ending both of us. I stood on a bridge one night, thinking how easy it would be." "Mom," Ethan's voice cracked. "But I didn't. And a few days later, I met someone, a man." Helena's eyes grew distant, looking at a past Ethan had never known existed. He was middle-aged, working class. His clothes were old but clean. He found me sleeping on a bench near his building, and instead of calling the police or walking away, he asked if I needed help. Tears fell freely down her cheeks now. "He brought me to his apartment, a tiny studio barely big enough for one person. He gave me the bed, said he'd sleep on the floor. Every day he went to work, and every evening he came home with food. He always claimed he'd bought too much, but I knew he was going without so I could eat." Ethan felt his own eyes burning. "He did this for 3 months. Took care of me, a complete stranger, never asked for anything, never made me feel like I owed him, just helped because—" Helena's voice broke. "Because he said every child deserves to be born safe." She looked at Ethan directly. "When you were born, he took me to the hospital, paid for everything, Afterward, he helped me find a job, the laundry service where I worked for years. He said, "You have a son now. You need to be strong for him." And then, she paused, fresh tears falling. Then, one day, he was just gone. I went to his apartment, and someone else lived there. The landlord said he'd moved out in the middle of the night, left no forwarding address. "Why would he leave?" Ethan asked. "I don't know. I looked for him for months, years even. I wanted to thank him properly, to repay him somehow, but I never found him." Helena gripped Ethan's hand harder. "Everything we have, Ethan, this house, your company, our life, it all exists because a kind man helped us when we had nothing. Without him, neither of us would be here." She reached up and touched Ethan's face gently. "And the man you described today, Samuel, the way he helps people, the way he gives everything away, the way he believes kindness matters more than survival. It sounds so much like him, like the man who saved us." "You think it's the same person?" "I don't know." Helena wiped her eyes. "It's been 25 years. People change, but that kind of goodness, that's rare, Ethan. I've lived a long time, and I've never met anyone else like him." She stood up shakily, and Ethan rose with her. "If there's even a chance it's him," Helena said, her voice stronger now, "we have to find him. We have to help him. We owe him everything." Ethan pulled his mother into a hug, and they stood there in the expensive living room, both crying for different reasons that were somehow the same. "We'll help him, Mom," Ethan promised. "Whether it's the same man or not, Samuel deserves better than an alley. We'll figure something out." Helena nodded against his shoulder. "Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you." That night, Ethan lay awake in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought about his mother sleeping in parks while pregnant. He thought about a kind stranger who'd given her shelter. Also, he thought about Samuel, sleeping right now on a thin blanket in a cold alley. The distance between those two images, his comfort and Samuel's suffering, felt obscene. Somewhere around 2 a.m., Ethan made a decision. Tomorrow, he would do something. He didn't know exactly what yet, but something. Because Samuel was right about one thing. The only power any of them really had was the choice to be kind. And Ethan was done pretending that power didn't matter. He finally fell asleep as the sky began to lighten, and for the first time in years, he dreamed about being a child, safe in his mother's arms, while a stranger with gentle eyes watched over them both. Ethan woke at 5 a.m. to find his mother already in the kitchen. She sat at the breakfast table with a cup of tea growing cold in front of her, staring out at the garden as dawn broke over the city. She'd clearly been there a while. "Couldn't sleep?" Ethan asked, pouring himself coffee. "Kept thinking about him," Helena admitted. "About both of them, the man from my past and Samuel. Wondering if they're the same person. Wondering what his life has been like all these years." She looked up at Ethan. "How do we help him, Ethan? We can't just give him money. He'd give it all away to someone else, just like he did with yours." "I know." Ethan sat down across from her. "I've been thinking about that too." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind of silence only possible between people who know each other deeply. The kitchen door swung open, and Martin, their butler, entered. "Good morning, sir, ma'am. Shall I prepare breakfast?" "Please," Helena said. "And Martin, make extra, would you? More than we'll eat." Martin's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Of course, ma'am. Any preferences?" "Whatever's easiest. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast. Enough for, 4 or 5 people." After Martin left, Ethan smiled at his mother. "You're already planning, aren't you?" "The dinner party you hosted last night," Helena said. "All that leftover food. Martin was going to throw it out. I saw him preparing to. And I thought, that's perfectly good food. Food that Samuel and his friends could use. So we take it to them." "We take it to them," Helena confirmed. "It's a start. Not a solution, but a start." Martin returned with breakfast, and as promised, he'd made enough for a small army. Scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, buttered toast, fresh fruit. Ethan and Helena ate sparingly, leaving most of it untouched. "Martin," Ethan said as the butler began to clear, "don't dispose of any of this. Pack it up carefully. The leftover dinner from last night, too. All of it. And check the refrigerator. Anything that's going to expire in the next few days, pack that as well." Martin hesitated. "Sir, forgive me, but that's quite a lot of food. Where shall I We're taking it to some people who need it, Helena said gently. People who don't have enough to eat. Understanding dawned on Martin's weathered face, and he smiled, a rare, genuine expression. Very good, ma'am. I'll pack everything carefully. Sandwiches, salads, the roasted chicken from last night. And there are several loaves of bread that are still fresh. Perhaps some fruit as well? Yes, all of it, Ethan said. And Martin, thank you. While Martin packed food, Helena disappeared to her room. She returned with several shopping bags. Clothes, she explained to Ethan. Things you've barely worn. That cashmere sweater from Christmas that didn't fit right. The jackets you never liked. And some things of my own. Warm socks, scarves. It's going to be cold tonight. By 7 p.m., they had assembled an impressive collection. Multiple bags of food, carefully packed and sealed. Warm clothing, even a few blankets that Helena had pulled from the guest room closet. Ready? Ethan asked. Helena squared her shoulders. Ready. They loaded everything into Ethan's Mercedes. The Tesla seemed too flashy for this mission. As Ethan drove through the city, the landscape changed gradually. The clean, bright streets of the financial district gave way to older neighborhoods, buildings with cracked facades, fewer streetlights. Helena sat in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I'm nervous, she admitted. What if it's not him? What if I've built this up in my mind and... Then we'll still be helping people who need help, Ethan said. That's not nothing, Mom. They parked near the alley, and Ethan felt his heart rate pick up as they gathered the bags. It was fully dark now, and the alley entrance looked even more forbidding than it had that morning, but they walked in anyway, carrying their offerings. The alley was quieter at night. A small fire burned in a metal drum about halfway down, and several people huddled around it for warmth. Ethan recognized Samuel's silhouette immediately. Something about the curve of his shoulders, the way he held himself. Samuel and Walter sat close to the fire, hands extended toward the warmth. They both wore the same clothes as earlier, insufficient against the dropping temperature. Ethan and Helena's footsteps echoed against the walls. Everyone at the fire looked up, faces guarded and wary. Strange people in nice clothes didn't usually come here with good intentions, but then Samuel stood, recognition dawning on his face. Mr. Cole, what are you? We brought food, Ethan said, setting down his bags. And warm clothes. We thought you might need them. Samuel stared at the bags, then at Ethan and Helena, then back at the bags. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Walter struggled to his feet, his eyes wide. Is this real? It's real, Helena said softly. She was staring at Samuel with an intensity that made Ethan's breath catch. She moved closer to the fire, letting the light fall on Samuel's face more clearly. Samuel seemed to feel the weight of her gaze. He looked at her, really looked, and something flickered in his eyes. Confusion, then a spark of something else. Ma'am, he said uncertainly, have we met before? Helena's hands were shaking. I don't know. Maybe. A long time ago. She took a breath. Do you remember, 25 years ago, helping a young woman who was pregnant, giving her a place to stay? The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Samuel's eyes widened slowly. His mouth fell open. You can't be. My name is Helena, she whispered. Helena Cole. Back then, my last name was Mitchell. Samuel took a step back, his hand going to his chest. Helena Mitchell, the girl with the baby. You were so scared, and I had a spare room, and I couldn't just... He couldn't seem to finish sentences, his thoughts tumbling over themselves. You saved us, Helena said, tears streaming down her face. You saved me and my son, and I looked for you, Samuel. I looked everywhere. For years. I wanted to thank you. I wanted to repay you for your kindness. Samuel, Walter breathed, this is the woman you told me about, the one you helped? Samuel wasn't listening to Walter. Yeah, sorry. He was staring at Helena, his weathered face transformed by disbelief and wonder and something like joy. You're alive, he said hoarsely. You and the baby, the little boy. You're both alive. More than alive. Helena gestured to Ethan. This is him, Samuel. This is the baby you helped bring into the world. This is my son, Ethan. Samuel turned to look at Ethan, really look at him for the first time. The baby, he repeated numbly. You were so small. You fit in my two hands. And now I'm 40 years old, Ethan said, his own voice unsteady. I'm alive because of you. We're both alive because you chose to help a stranger." The fire popped, sending up a small shower of sparks. Then Samuel made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and Helena stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Samuel stood rigid for a moment, as if he'd forgotten what an embrace felt like. Then his arms came up slowly and he hugged her back, and he was crying, and so was she, and so was Ethan, and even Walter was wiping his eyes. "I thought about you so often," Samuel said into Helena's shoulder. "Wondered if you were okay, if the baby was healthy, if you found your way. I prayed for you. Even after I lost everything, I prayed that you were happy." "We are," Helena sobbed. "We're happy. We're successful. We have everything we could want. And it's all because of you. All of it." She pulled back to look at him, her hands on his shoulders. "But you," she said, her voice breaking. "You ended up here. Why? How?" Samuel wiped his eyes roughly. "Life happened. I lost my job in the recession, lost my apartment. My wife left me because I couldn't provide anymore. My daughter, she was ashamed of me." He smiled sadly. "But I'm not bitter, Helena. I'm not, because I know that helping you was the right thing to do. I'd do it again, even knowing how things turned out for me." "That's not fair," Ethan said harshly. "You shouldn't have to suffer for being good." "Life isn't fair, Mr. Cole," Samuel said gently, "but we can be kind anyway. That's the choice we have." Helena gripped his hands tightly. "Samuel Reed, you are coming home with us. Tonight. No arguments." Samuel shook his head immediately. "I can't impose on you like that. You've already—" "This isn't charity," Helena interrupted firmly. "This is a debt we're repaying. 25 years overdue. You gave me shelter when I had nothing. Now I'm offering you shelter. It's not generosity. It's justice." "Besides," Ethan added, "you saved my life before it even really began. The least I can do is offer you a place to live." Samuel looked between them, his eyes bright with tears. I'm not, I'd be such a burden. I don't fit in your world." "You fit in any world," Helena said, "because you're one of the best men I've ever known. Please, Samuel, please let us do this." Walter cleared his throat. "Sam, my friend, I've known you 3 years, and in that time I've watched you give away every good thing that came to you. For once in your life, accept something for yourself. These people want to help you. They're not offering out of pity. They're offering out of love. Can't you see that?" Samuel looked at Walter, then at the bags of food and clothing, then at Helena and Ethan's faces. He swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Helena pleaded. "Please, Samuel, say yes." The fire crackled. The night air was cold. Samuel stood in his thin coat, tears on his cheeks, surrounded by the evidence of kindness returned. Finally, slowly, he nodded. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes. Thank you. Yes." Helena hugged him again, and Ethan joined them, and Walter clapped Samuel on the back with a grin, and for a moment, in that dirty alley, there was nothing but joy. The Mercedes was quiet on the drive to Ethan's house. Samuel sat in the back seat with Walter. Ethan had insisted Walter come too, at least for tonight, for a warm meal and a safe bed. Both men kept touching the leather seats tentatively, as if they might disappear. "I can't believe this is happening," Samuel murmured. "This morning I was scraping by. Tonight I'm—" "Going home," Helena said from the front seat. She'd turned to look at him, her expression soft. "You're going home, Samuel." When they pulled through the gates and up the long driveway, Walter made a small sound of astonishment. "This is where you live?" "Where we live," Ethan corrected gently. "At least for now. At least until we figure out something more permanent." The house rose before them, 3 stories of brick and glass, windows glowing with warm light. To Ethan, it was just home, but seeing it through Samuel and Walter's eyes, he realized how overwhelming it must seem. Martin met them at the door, and if he was surprised by their guests, he gave no sign. "Welcome home, sir, ma'am, and welcome to our guests." He inclined his head respectfully to Samuel and Walter. "Martin, this is Samuel Reed and Walter Grant," Helena said. "They'll be staying with us. Could you prepare the 2 guest rooms on the 2nd floor, the ones with the garden view?" "Of course, ma'am. Immediately." Martin paused. "Would the gentlemen like to freshen up? I could draw baths, lay out some clean clothes." Samuel looked down at himself, at his dirty coat, his worn shoes, his hands permanently marked with grime. Yes, that would be... Yes, please. Martin led them upstairs while Ethan and Helena waited in the foyer. I can't quite believe it either, Helena said quietly. After 25 years. Karma, Ethan said. That's what Samuel would call it. Kindness coming back around. Maybe he's right. Upstairs, Samuel stood in the guest bathroom staring at the large tub filling with hot water. Steam rose from the surface, and on the counter, Martin had laid out fresh towels, soap, shampoo, even a new toothbrush still in its package. When had Samuel last had a hot bath? He couldn't remember. Years, certainly. He undressed slowly, embarrassed by his thin frame, his ribs too visible, old scars from fights and accidents on the street. But the water beckoned, and he lowered himself in with a gasp that was almost a sob. The heat soaked into his muscles, into his bones, washing away layers of dirt and cold and pain he'd learned to ignore. He dunked his head under, scrubbing his hair with shampoo that smelled like cedar and mint. Luxury beyond imagining. When he finally emerged, wrinkled and pink, he found clothes laid out on the bed. Soft cotton pants, a cashmere sweater, warm socks. They fit reasonably well. Ethan was broader than Samuel, but not by much. Samuel caught sight of himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Clean, dressed in quality clothes, he looked almost respectable, almost normal. Down the hall, Walter was having a similar experience, weeping quietly in his bath. They met at the top of the stairs, both looking scrubbed and overwhelmed. Together, they descended to find Ethan and Helena waiting. Better? Helena asked, smiling. I feel human again, Samuel said. His voice was thick with emotion. You were always human, Helena said firmly. But now you're a clean, warm human. Come on, Martin has prepared dinner. The dining room table could seat 12, but tonight it was set for 4. The food was simple but abundant. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh bread. To Samuel and Walter, it looked like a feast from a dream. They ate slowly at first, self-consciously, but Helena and Ethan kept the conversation flowing naturally, asking gentle questions about their lives, telling stories about their own. Gradually, Samuel and Walter relaxed. This chicken, Walter said at one point, is the best thing I've ever tasted. Martin is an excellent cook, Helena agreed. But I think maybe you've just been eating terrible food for too long. Walter laughed, a real laugh, surprised and delighted. That's probably true. After dinner, they moved to the living room. A fire crackled in the fireplace, and the sofas were deep and comfortable. Samuel sank into one with a sigh that seemed to come from his soul. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, he said, that this is a dream and I'll be back in the alley. It's not a dream, Ethan assured him. You're here. You're safe. And tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps. But for tonight, just rest. I don't know how to repay this, Samuel said, looking between Helena and Ethan. You've given me so much. You gave us everything first, Helena said simply. Without you, Ethan wouldn't exist. I wouldn't have survived. This isn't repayment. It's impossible to repay what you did. This is just us trying to do a fraction of what you did for us. Samuel's eyes filled with tears again. I didn't do it for repayment. We know, Ethan said. That's why you deserve it. Eventually, Martin showed them to their rooms. Samuel's was beautiful. A large bed with crisp white sheets, a window overlooking the garden, a bookshelf full of classics. A robe hung on the back of the door, and a carafe of water sat on the nightstand. Samuel sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was so soft, and put his face in his hands. For 10 years, he'd slept on concrete, on cardboard, in doorways. He'd been cold and hungry and frightened. He'd wondered if he'd die alone in some alley, unmissed and forgotten. And now he was here, in a clean room, in a safe house with people who cared whether he lived or died. Thank you, he whispered to the empty room, to God, to the universe, to Helena and Ethan. Thank you. He lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. The sheets smelled like lavender. The mattress cradled his aching back. He thought about the day's journey, from helping a stranger retrieve a key, to meeting Helena again, to this moment. The path of kindness that had wound through 25 years and brought them all back together. Maybe he'd been right all along. Maybe kindness did come back. Tears slid down his temples into his hair, but they were good tears, grateful tears. For the first time in a decade, Samuel Reed fell asleep without fear, without cold, without hunger. He slept deeply and peacefully, like a man who'd finally come home after a very long journey. Down the hall, Helena stood at her window, looking out at the garden. Ethan came to stand beside her. "Are you okay, Mom?" "I've been carrying guilt for 25 years, she said quietly. "Guilt that I couldn't find him, couldn't thank him, couldn't help him. And now," she turned to look at her son, "now I can finally let that go. He's safe. He's here. The debt isn't cleared. It never can be. But at least I can try." Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. "He's a good man." "The best," Helena agreed. "And tomorrow we make sure he stays safe, that he never has to go back to that alley." "Agreed." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight on the garden, both thinking about the strange and wonderful ways that kindness could circle back, even after decades, even when it seemed impossible. In his room, Samuel slept on, dreaming of warmth and safety and family, things he'd thought lost forever, now miraculously restored. And in another room, Walter lay awake, staring at the ceiling in wonder, thinking that maybe, just maybe, good things could happen to good people after all. Tomorrow would bring new questions, new plans, new challenges. But tonight, there was only peace, only gratitude, only the quiet joy of kindness repaid. Morning came gently. Samuel woke slowly, confused by the softness beneath him, by the warmth, by the light streaming through actual windows with actual curtains. For a moment he panicked. Where was he? Before memory returned in a rush. Helena, Ethan, the house. It was real. He sat up carefully, his body protesting less than usual. His back didn't ache from concrete. His joints didn't scream from cold. He felt rested. The concept was almost foreign. There was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," Samuel called, his voice rough from sleep. Martin entered carrying a tray. "Good morning, Mr. Reed. I've brought coffee and some breakfast. Mrs. Cole thought you might prefer to ease into the day." On the tray was coffee, real coffee, dark and fragrant, along with toast, eggs, and fresh fruit. Samuel stared at it. "This is... You didn't have to." "It's our pleasure, sir." Martin set the tray on the small table by the window. "Please take your time. When you're ready, the family is downstairs." After Martin left, Samuel sat at the table and looked out at the garden. Birds sang in the trees. The sun was bright and warm. He bit into the toast. It was perfectly buttered, and felt tears prick his eyes again. This was what normal people had every day. This comfort, this safety. And he'd forgotten what it felt like. Downstairs, Walter was having a similar experience, eating scrambled eggs in the kitchen while chatting with Martin about his years in England. An hour later, both men joined Helena and Ethan in the living room. Morning light made the space warm and inviting. "Did you sleep well?" Helena asked. "Better than I have in a decade," Samuel admitted. "I almost forgot where I was when I woke up." "Good," Helena smiled. "We wanted to talk to you both about what comes next." Samuel and Walter exchanged glances. "We don't expect you to leave," Ethan said quickly, "but we thought you should know what we're thinking. For Samuel, this is your home now for as long as you want it. We have plenty of space. And Walter, you're welcome to stay as well, until we can help you find your own place if that's what you'd prefer." Walter's eyes went wide. "You'd do that? For me?" "Samuel cares about you," Helena said simply. "That's enough for us." Samuel shook his head slowly. I can't just live here like a charity case. I need to contribute somehow. I need to earn my place." "You already earned it," Helena said firmly. 25 years ago. But if you want to feel useful, we'll figure something out. Maybe you could help Martin with the garden. It's gotten a bit overgrown. Or if you want, we could help you find work, something stable." "I'd like that," Samuel said quietly. "To work again, to be useful." "Then we'll make it happen," Ethan promised. They talked for another hour about possibilities, about logistics, about the future. It felt surreal to Samuel, planning a future beyond the next meal, the next night, the next crisis. Around noon, there was a knock at the front door. Martin answered it and returned looking puzzled. "Sir, there's a young woman here asking for Samuel Reed. She says her name is Lily Carter." Samuel's face lit up. "Lily! She must have been worried when she couldn't find me in the alley." Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her grocery store uniform, her face creased with worry that transformed into shock when she saw Samuel, clean, well-dressed, sitting in a mansion's living room. "Samuel, what is this? Where's Walter? Are you okay? I went to the alley and you weren't there and I thought—" She was speaking rapidly, on the edge of panic. Samuel stood and went to her, taking her hands. "Lily, it's okay. Everything's okay. Actually, everything's wonderful." He turned to Helena and Ethan. "This is Lily Carter. She's been helping me with food from her store." "We remember," Ethan said warmly. "You brought food yesterday, just when it was needed most." Lily looked around at all of them, completely confused. "Will someone please tell me what's going on?" So they did. Samuel explained about helping Ethan, about Ethan following him, about discovering that Helena was the woman he'd helped decades ago, about being invited here, about the chance to start over. By the time he finished, Lily was crying. "Oh, Samuel, oh my God, you deserve this. You deserve all of this and more." "Would you like some lunch?" Helena offered. "We'd love to hear more about how you know Samuel." Over lunch, Lily told stories about Samuel's kindness, how he'd given her money for her mother's medicine, how he'd helped her carry groceries when she'd sprained her ankle, how he'd talked her through a panic attack when she'd lost her job last year. "He saved my life," Lily said simply, "multiple times, and he never asked for anything in return." "That's Samuel," Walter said, smiling at his friend. "Gives everything away." "Not anymore," Helena said. "From now on, Samuel gets to receive for a change." After Lily left, with promises to visit often, the four of them sat in comfortable silence. "I still can't quite believe this is real," Samuel said finally. "That kindness actually does come back. I believed it. I told everyone I believed it, but some part of me wondered if I was just telling myself a story to make the suffering bearable." "It's real," Ethan said. "You're the proof. Your whole life is the proof." Samuel looked at this family. At Helena, who he'd helped so long ago, at Ethan, who existed because of that help, at Walter, who'd become his friend in the darkest times. He looked around at the comfortable room, felt the warmth of the house, smelled lunch still lingering in the air. "I was so lost," he said quietly. "When I lost everything, my job, my wife, my daughter, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd failed at being a man, a husband, a father, but maybe—" He paused, searching for words. "Maybe I didn't fail. Maybe I just found a different way to live, to matter, to make a difference." "You made all the difference," Helena said, her voice thick with emotion. "To me, to Ethan, to everyone you've helped over the years. You've lived a life of meaning, Samuel. That's more than most people can say." Walter raised his water glass. "To Samuel Reed, the best man I know." They all raised their glasses, even Samuel, though his hand shook slightly. "To second chances," Ethan added. "To kindness that comes home," Helena finished. They drank, and through the window, the afternoon sun cast golden light across the room, warming everything it touched. Outside, the world continued its usual chaos, people rushing, competing, taking what they could get. But inside this house, a different kind of world existed. One built on generosity, on memory, on debts that could never truly be repaid but could at least be honored. Samuel Reed had given everything when he had nothing, had believed in goodness when life gave him every reason not to, had chosen kindness even when kindness seemed foolish. And now, finally, he was home. Not just in a physical house, but in a place where he was valued, where he was loved, where his life meant something, not because of what he owned, but because of who he was. The circle was complete. The debt, impossible to fully repay, was at least acknowledged. And a new chapter began, one where Samuel could finally rest, could finally receive instead of always giving, could finally know that his faith in humanity had not been misplaced. As evening approached and they moved to the living room for tea, Samuel looked around at these people who had become his family, and he smiled. A real smile, free and genuine and full of hope. 25 years ago, he'd helped a desperate young woman because it was the right thing to do. Today, that choice had saved his life in return. Kindness had come full circle, and Samuel Reed, at last, was exactly where he belonged. And just like that, the story of Samuel Reed came full circle, from a quiet man sleeping beneath an alleyway tarp to the very heart of a family he once saved without ever asking for anything in return. from giving away the little he had, to finally receiving the kindness he had spent a lifetime offering to others. If this journey touched you in any way, if Samuel's faith and kindness stirred something inside you, or if Ethan's transformation reminded you that compassion can still change the world, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, so together we can keep stories like this alive in a world that too often forgets how powerful a simple act of kindness can be. See you in the next story.